Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. Well, folks, my faith in humanity has fallen just a little more today. Some people just have absolutely no clue on how to behave in society. This morning I'm out and about picking up breakfast for the missus and myself. She prefers Taco Bell. I prefer Carl's Jr. Monster biscuits are amazing. I pull into the Taco Bell drive-thru, and as I'm ordering, another car pulls up behind me and just starts blaring their horn. I'm trying to finish up, but this woman just doesn't stop. All the while, she screams out the window that I'm a terrorist and a communist, your average Caucasian American male. And I have no idea why she is screaming these things. I pull forward to the pickup window. Karen is still screaming at me, but has given up on honking. Maybe she annoyed herself with it. The employee asks if I know this person. I do not. She hands me my bag and I leave the drive-thru. Karen follows me out. So I pull up to the exit and make like I'm going to turn right, but at the last second I pull left, and now she's stuck at the stop sign waiting for her turn. I continue down the street, make a quick right into a bank parking lot and wait there for a few minutes, hoping she gives up. After about 2 minutes and she is nowhere to be seen, I decide she went on about her crazy day, and I continue down the street, a couple blocks past the Taco Bell as my breakfast stop, Carl Jr. I pull into the drive-thru. I had already ordered online for pickup, points-free food, and am asked to park while they wait for the fresh tater tots and French toast sticks. As I pull into my usual parking spot, the Karen returned. She spotted me and decided to peel into the parking lot and parked right next to me. I roll up my window as she approaches, and she starts screaming at me again how I'm an imperial communist that I need to go back to my own country. That I'm a terrorist? I think she assumed I was Russian. I don't know. The manager of the Carl's comes out to give me my food. I'm an almost daily regular here, so we shoot the breeze for a few minutes. And sees this Karen going off on me. She asks her what the problem is. Karen rants to her the same thing she's been ranting at me the few moments she's been there. I roll down my window to get my food. At least she didn't try to take that, and tell Karen, "What in the hell are you talking about? I'm not a terrorist. I've lived in the USA all my life and have no idea what the hell you are on about." And then she explains herself, "What about all these communist stickers all over your car? What's that Arab language say, huh?" And then it hits me. I'm a Star Wars nut. I drive a white 2019 Chevrolet Bolt, and it greatly resembles a stormtrooper helmet. So I have the Imperial logo on the tailgate. The Empire doesn't care about your stick figure family decal with a TIE fighter and a T-Walker blowing up some stick figures and some Arbesh Star Wars galactic basic text that reads honk if you can read this. I quickly explained to her that I'm not a terrorist. This is all Star Wars stuff, including the Star Wars writing it's not any language on this planet or in this galaxy. Let me assure you. Thankfully, she realized her mistake really quickly. She sputters out a quick, "Oh, sorry," jumps back in her car and drives away. Thankfully, that was the end of it. Some people, I swear, I'm not going to have political messages on my car. That's a good way to get it vandalized. So the story begins with my needing to hire a contractor to repair damage to a pole barn that I was constructing on our property. The structure was partially done when a storm hit and the structure had substantial damage. So we bid a few contractors, and the guy that seemed to be the best one, who was actually a referral from a friend, we signed a contract and he started work within a week. We had also signed with him to complete the structure after the insurance portion was completed because his crew could do this much more efficiently and a better job than we could do ourselves, which is what we were originally doing. His crew completes the insurance portion of the job, but then abandons the project just before starting the rest of it. No call, no email, nothing. I called and texted, and not one of my contact points was ever returned. At this point, it was late December, and we thought maybe he and his crew had holiday plans but would resume right after. Then another windstorm hit, and his crew hadn't braced the partially completed structure correctly, and it almost collapsed again. I tried for 2 weeks to find him. I even drove out to the address on the contract we signed, which ended up being a house on a rural road next town over. I knocked on the door, seeing his car there. No one answered. I stopped by this house several different times, trying to catch him. The last few times his car was no longer there, but the work truck of another company was. Wanting to know if he owned the house, I pulled up the tax records for it and the county it was in. Name on the house was not registered to him. So it sounds like he rented or at least was staying with a friend. The company info on the truck was registered to someone unrelated and not on the tax records. The tax records showed that the actual taxpayer of the property lived elsewhere. Here where I live, the property owner name is listed, and if they do not actually live at that property, such as in using it for an investment, their address that would have the actual tax bill sent to is also on there. Given that knowledge, I pulled the court records for him to see if maybe he had been recently arrested or if there was any other info. What I found was about 30 years of driving offenses, including a lot of DUI charges and other records. At this point, I figured he was long gone, and as I hadn't paid out any money to him for work that was not complete, I would just move on. At least until the structural engineer I hired to assess the damage to the work that was done stated that the structure had to be started over on that part, and the building materials that the contractor had left scattered around the job site were also unusable due to being left improperly stored. I had hoped that the structure could just be pulled back into place and resecured, but I was told this is not the case. So began the bigger drama and my determination to find him. So far, his negligence has cost $1,200 for a structural engineer opinion. Our insurance company paid for a second opinion because they didn't like what ours said. $2,500 for insurance deductible to the newest contractor hired to repair the exact damage that happened 3 months prior, and $7,000 in materials that his insurance company refused to cover or pay for, and my insurance policy on the project did not cover either. The adjuster for his insurance company said that he was able to locate the contractor but refused to give up any information for him directly. That, and the fact that the project wasn't finished, had detriment to my farm and boarding business, because 2 of my pastures that were connected to where the building was sitting couldn't be used. This limited my ability to use natural pasture grass in summer months by rotating pastures for each herd, and had to purchase hay, which gets quite expensive. By the time the building was completed and I could get my pastures back to normal, I had losses of over $14,000. Because I didn't know where he now lived, I used the only address I had for him to file for small claims court, which here has a limit of $15,000. The court documents I served came back undeliverable. This meant that I was kind of stuck because a court date cannot be scheduled until all parties are properly served. But how do I find an address for someone who doesn't seem to register to any particular address directly? Time was still on my side as this was still early, mid-last year, so I kept a watch on social media for anything with his name, which was a very unique one. If there was another man of the same name within this state, within even the same metro area, it was unlikely because of how unique the name was. Then one day, this past fall, after Google searching the name again, there it was, his Facebook page. His name hadn't shown up before on Facebook with several searches. Not sure why this was the case. Even better, all his settings were set to the public. I could see everything he wrote about, including his recent commitment to stay sober earlier in 2017, just after he abandoned my project, and his employer's name? He had posted a pic of him on a job site, and someone asked where he worked now. He named the place. So a quick Google search and voila, got an address to serve him court papers too. So I refiled with the newfound address, but I still needed a home address to enforce the judgment once I won the case. So what did I do? Seeing that he was listed as a single in his page, I used a fake Facebook profile that I originally hadn't used to test various features I enable on pages that I start up under my real profile. Truthfully, I only used that profile for that purpose to make sure the settings I put in place truly work. But now it would serve another purpose, getting this guy to give me all the information I needed, playing on his being middle-aged and single. To create my alter ego, I found a website of a cute blonde lady in her 40s, so as to not be too young for him, since he was around mid-40s himself, and just yanked pics. I only set one to the profile photo, and would use the rest if he asked for more. I changed all the pics in the profile to look like it was a typical page of the average mid-40s female. Holy heck did this work, and it worked so well. I used some information I found on his page to strike up a conversation about stuff stolen out of his work truck in the alley behind his house. Big clue. And it was reported to the city police dept. He named the city, so another big clue. So, using this information, and telling him I had grown up in the same area, I got him to give me a general area where he lived. Keeping conversation cool like is the pizza joint still there. They'd been around forever, etc., so he wouldn't get suspicious. Thank God for Google Maps giving me a better idea of that area so I could talk about it like I did in fact grow up there. In reality, I have only ever been in that city twice, and other times drove through on the way to somewhere else. I was able to narrow down the area he talked about, and using that info, I pulled the police report records from that city. There were 3 reports done within the same area on that same day, he reported. So, using that information, I pulled the county tax records to see who owned the houses. I found 3 houses within that area that could possibly be rentals since the owner name and taxpayer billing address did not match. This could be a long shot to find the person, but I didn't have anything to lose by searching. Just as I was about to call the homeowners to see if anyone by the name of the contractor rented from them, he posted some info on his page that made the calls completely unnecessary. He posted the name of his roommate in a status update, who I then checked out the profile of. The profile lists the roommate's landscaping business. A quick Google search of that business name and bingo. His state business registration address matched one of the 3 addresses I suspected to be the rental house. So now I have his home address. He had already been served at his employer's address for the court date. Fast forward to the court date. He didn't show up, which I suspected he wouldn't, so I got default judgment. Between serving him papers and the court date passing, the Facebook profile I was using to talk to him was helpful in getting info out of him about his life, his job situation, how much he made per hour, me feigning knowledge about what construction trades paid, and the fact that he was looking at changing employers. He even told me the name of that employer, so I was armed with info should he decide to not work with me. He played right into my hands. Once I got the official judgment from the small claims court win, I decided to contact him myself on Facebook using Messenger. I sat down and wrote out a whole paragraph to him, first typing it on Word so that I could print it out and edit it and have my husband read it as well. I wrote that while I was angry at him, I was going to give him one chance to work a deal with me rather than using our State Dept of Revenue Play Collection Officer for me. I hate dealing with our State Department of Revenue. They make the IRS look like Sunday school teachers. But if it came down to that, I would, and they would start garnishing his wages, and here they take 25s of each paycheck after taxes, and have the person's employer do it for them, and then send it to me. However, I hate letting the state be the middleman because they just complicate things. But I told him straight out that if he refused to work with me directly, I would go to that extreme. I told him that I know he's an addict and has had struggles in the past. I told him that knowing he has had struggles, I was willing to work with him directly and give him an opportunity to offer a monthly payment amount that works for him and his budget, rather than have the state decide the amount for him. To shorten this up, he replied, agreed, signed, and had notarized a monthly payment agreement, complete with a list of manual labor tasks that he could use in place of a payment or two to help with some projects on my farm. All right, so here's the deal, folks. I've got this neighbor, Karen, and her kid, let's call him Brat, for obvious reasons, who's around 9 years old. All right, let me set the stage here. I'm a big fan of motorcycles, always have been. It runs in the family, you could say. My late uncle, rest his soul, was a Harley Davidson enthusiast, and he passed down that love for the open road and those thunderous engines to me. So naturally, I ended up owning a sweet Harley of my own. Now, this baby of mine weighs in at a whopping 600 pounds, a beast of a bike that I treat like my own child. I take care of it, polish it, and make sure it's always looking top-notch, and I park it right outside my building where I can keep a close eye on it. So, I've been parking my pride and joy right outside our building. Now, here's the thing about Brat. He's got this obsession with my Harley. At first, I thought it was cute, a kid loving motorcycles. I even let him sit on it a few times and pretend like he's king of the road. But I also warned him about how heavy that bike is. I mean, it's not a toy. It's a serious machine, heavy as heck. But this kid, he's got the memory span of a goldfish or something. Every single time I'd roll up to take my Harley for a spin, guess who I'd find perched on it? Yep, you guessed it right, Brat. One time I saw him standing on it with his grubby sneakers. I was like, hey, buddy, I told you to be careful with my ride. But I guess my words went in one ear and out the other. So, fed up with this nonsense, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I waltzed over to Karen, Brat's mom, and I told her straight up that this ain't cool. Her kid was messing with my property, and I was genuinely worried that he could get hurt. I expected some sort of parenting intervention, but you know what she said, don't overreact. Boys will be boys. Fast forward to the incident that's got me sharing this tale with all. I was heading to my place to grab some stuff before heading over to my girlfriend's. Parked my Harley like usual and spotted Brat playing in the street nearby. I gave him the stern eye and said, remember, no climbing on the bike, all right? The little scamp nodded, and I trusted him about as far as I could throw him. But then it happened. I heard a massive crash, and my heart sank. You guessed it, Brat didn't listen. That little rascal was on my bike when it decided it had had enough of his shenanigans and collapsed right on top of him. I rushed down there, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The kid was screaming his lungs out. I managed to get the bike back up and checked on him. Bruises all over and what looked like a broken toe. I felt bad for the little guy, but I'd warned him plenty of times. Just when I thought things couldn't get crazier, in storms Karen, hollering like a banshee. She charged at me, landed a punch on my chest, and had the nerve to blame me for her kid's mishap. I couldn't believe it. I told her she should get Brat to the hospital, but she was too busy hurling insults at me. So off she went, dragging her crying Brat, still blaming me for everything. I couldn't help but shake my head at the whole mess. But guess what? The drama didn't end there. I woke up to a text message from Karen the next day, demanding that I cover her son's medical bills because he had a fracture. Can you believe the audacity? I told her it wasn't my fault. I'd warned Brat 1,000,000 times. But she wasn't having any of it. She even threatened to call the cops on me if I didn't cough up the cash. Now I'm just sitting here, scratching my head, wondering how I got tangled up in this wild ride with Karen and her Brat. Seriously, Reddit, can you believe the nerve of some people? We're all 14-year-olds in this story. My friend and I are female, and the stalker is a male. So this all started as I went into high school. I had known Jones before from junior high, but all I knew was he had some mental disorder that I don't know, but I guess it might slightly explain his behavior. Anyways, he was lonely from what I knew. He didn't have many friends, and when people talked about him, they often called him his speed and whatnot. I felt pity for him. I had a friend with autism who was treated like this, and I knew it wasn't right. But I still kept away from him because all I was worried about in middle school was good grades. So fast forward a little and I'm now in high school. Things were only going to get rough. I had symptoms of AD before, but doctors weren't concerned about it, considering I was doing somewhat well. I did not expect everything to go how it did. Symptoms just got worse. I couldn't finish anything in school. I barely passed. My parents and I were angry at myself. I fell into probably the darkest time of my life that I can remember. I didn't want to get up. I had nobody to talk to that would listen, and I'd almost attempt suicide every night, but something stopped me, and thank God I didn't. About a month into my year, Jones started taking a liking to me because he had tried with all the hot girls, and I was one of the ones on the bottom of his list since he was out of ideas. He went up to me in the halls one day, asked me out. I said no, and he walked off. That should have been it, but I guess he kept trying. I started walking home. He would often ask me out there. I said no, he walked off. It was weird, but I didn't think much of it. He was just trying to get a girlfriend because that was the thing everyone needed to be cool. Eventually, he just stops trying and finds more girls to harass, and life continued. Not long after that, somebody spread the rumor that I was with Jones. I got harassed for it a little. It was distressing, but I could deal with it, or so I told myself. Until this group of the most stereotypical high school jerks come up to me as I walk out of the lab. They slap my binder and say, "Oops," annoying but expected. So I continued. They start harassing me. It's usually just pinning me to my locker and calling me pathetic, sped lover. What kind of insult is that? And whatever you could think of. I felt helpless. Nobody was coming to help me, or even talk to me. That was until I met Raleigh. She had seen what was happening and just decided to talk to me a little. We grew fond of each other a little, but back to Jones getting worse. Jones had begun following me. He promised he would protect me from those jerks, even though he just stood aside whenever something happened. I told him to go away nicely, but he persisted. I could see him watching me often, and I generally felt unsafe. Even if somebody wanted to help, what could they do? Raleigh was risking everything, even talking to me, and the jerks had started to do whatever when they spotted me, walking home or such. One time, they threw a rock and hit me in the head. I was bleeding and in agony the rest of my walk home. It was pretty far from the school, 8 kilometers at least. I felt horrible. But it only got worse. As it turns out, somebody I knew gave my Discord tags to Jones because he had asked. So not only did I have him stalking me at school and down random streets, I had to block his countless accounts he made to stalk me. It was creepy. I didn't feel safe. Everyone was against me. Not even my own boyfriend. I had nobody but Raleigh. But one thing crossed the line if he didn't before. I was walking home telling him to get lost when he ran at me. He covers my eyes and touches me inappropriately. I twist his arm, he screams and lets go, and I run off. What the hell? That went from a 10 to a 100 very fast. I couldn't keep from crying. I was helpless. I was left just shocked, but it didn't surprise me, knowing him. I was walking down the hall after going to the washroom, back to my class. Jones was at a locker, and he walked towards me, so I walked faster. Unlucky me, he catches up to me by running, and he pushes me against the wall. Gross, I know. I'm tired of this, and every bit of anger I decide to put on him. I guess somebody heard me screaming because a teacher came around the hall to find me choking Jones. He pulls me off of him, and he sits up, choking on air. So the admin calls me in with Jones and says, "You guys apologize," and Jones, "Stop doing that. I didn't tell her about him stalking me out of embarrassment. I barely knew this admin, so she lets us go and life continues." However, Jones decides he hasn't had enough, so I'm walking home. We had just left school like 5 minutes ago, and I was with Raleigh because we decided that walking together would be nice and somewhat safer given the circumstances, as she too had been terrorized by that group of jerks earlier. We're walking down the sidewalk, and I notice Jones ahead of me. He seems angry, maybe because he had to see an admin. He starts yelling at me, and Raleigh looks at him confused. From what me and Raleigh remember, I took off my backpack with about 30 or so pounds of books and whatnot, and I swung it like a helicopter into the head of Jones. He's surprised, so he stumbles back a bit, and I have never seen myself so violent. I had left his mouth bleeding. He was missing 2 teeth, and I couldn't stop kicking him, so he had a lot of bruises and was left in quite bad shape after it. Apparently, it was so bad that he had to go to the hospital to get a few things fixed. I have fractured his finger. He had some bad bruises on his head, ribs, chest, and thighs, missing 2 teeth and a lot of cuts in his mouth, so much so that he looked like the guy from Jaws after he got bit on the boat. Let me tell you, it wasn't for me. I've never felt more power or great ever since I watched him like that. I had a few complications after, especially socially because I was seen as some psycho, even if I was defending myself. It's hard to describe how much pain he would have been in, and this story doesn't do it justice. But to you creeps out there, don't mess with anyone. You might not be so lucky to get away with a few bruises. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. My 31 female and my wife, 31 female, are expecting a baby. We are really excited as this is our first child. My main concern is my in-laws. I've never gotten along with them. My wife and I have been together for 15 years, and I tried for 10 long years to get them to like me. The only one that ever remotely warmed up to me is my sister-in-law, and it's not like we are super close. After my mother-in-law ruined our wedding, she felt my wife didn't include her enough, caused a huge scene, and stormed out of the wedding, taking her side of the family with her. I just stopped trying with them. To add insult to injury, she also blamed me for my wife's speech, where she felt she wasn't mentioned enough, even after my wife assured her I had nothing to do with writing it. After the wedding, my wife saw her family in a completely different light and said I didn't need to subject myself to their company anymore. I want to be clear that my wife is always on my side. It's just a lot of the stuff they would do would never be in front of her. It would never really upset me because I don't like or respect them. It was more annoying. The most frustrating thing was being polite to these jerks for the sake of my wife when they were so rude to me and my family. Since the wedding, I've only really gone to their major family events, which is usually like maximum twice a year. At these events, they usually treat me with cold indifference, which is the best I can hope for, really. The real problem is with how they, mostly my wife's parents, have recently been treating her. I've always thought that her family treated her like crap. Her sister is so obviously the golden child, and she was parentified really young when her parents divorced. She didn't really see it until recently when their treatment of her got really bad, and it's made her rethink their relationship. In the last 2 years, we have gone no contact with father-in-law because of his bigoted and political views, anti-LGBTQ, and really right-wing politics. He somehow did mental gymnastics to not have a problem with our relationship, and we are currently in low contact with mother-in-law because of her consistent narcissism and blatant favoritism for sister-in-law. There is a laundry list of transgressions by mother-in-law, but I'm worried about word count. Happy to make an update with more background about her entitled behavior if needed. Since I've gotten pregnant, my wife has been keeping mother-in-law and sister-in-law updated over text, which they are upset about. They express jealousy about how my family probably got the news in person. They did because we can trust them not to be jerks and make everything about them. My wife reached out to sister-in-law to spend some time with her for birthday, and she demanded that they invite mother-in-law and expressed how she can't just cut out their parents, that they don't deserve this, and they have no idea why she has done this to them. My view is that they absolutely do know, she has told them. Very nicely, much nicer than I would have been. Father-in-law just never contacted us again when she explained how his behavior was an issue and has never tried to fix their relationship. Mother-in-law immediately gets defensive anytime she tries to speak to her about her behavior. She then reverses the blame and plays the victim. She will then ignore my wife for a period of time and then pretend nothing happened. Mother-in-law has always been keen about grandchildren. Our child will be her first grandchild. I'm worried she thinks she will just be able to come see us in the hospital and have unlimited access to our child. My wife and I agree this will not be the case. Her terrible behavior to my wife and me aside, she has homophobic and racist views. Again, ironic given she supposedly supports her daughter and her wife being bi, but I think she views gay women as harmless and gay men are somehow more offensive. And I don't want her influencing our child in any way with that crap. We both agreed she could have limited contact, supervised, and planned visits. Would it be a good idea if I sent mother-in-law a message politely but firmly explaining that unless she significantly changes her behavior, she will have limited contact with her grandchild? My wife is of the opinion we should just leave it and she will figure it out eventually. I'm worried that if we don't explicitly tell her early, she is going to harass us after our baby is born, like she and my in-laws did after our wedding, and I don't want that drama while we will be stressed by new parents. I think this will absolutely kick the hornet's nest, but I think it's better to do it early as part of baby preparations. But it does have the potential to make things worse. Some background first. I worked for a precast concrete company as a job in between high school and college. The job sucked, but it paid well. We made a lot of the massive storm culverts and tunnel pieces that are dropped in place during construction instead of being made where they are. After a few weeks of working for this company, I was trained to run the industrial concrete mixer and did this every day. This mixer was 3 stories tall, mixed up to 4.5 cubic yards of concrete at a time, and was the most beat-up machine in the entire plant, which was saying something. It ran 6 days a week, 2 shifts a day, and was never maintained because the company couldn't get techs to come out on Sunday. It's only day not running, and didn't want to lose a work shift to get it maintained. The only good thing about it was that all the materials were weighed and fed in automatically. All it took was a button to start the process. The most common problem was the bottom release door not sealing correctly. It would be just barely cracked, allowing all the water to run out of it, resulting in an unusable, chunky mess that would need to be dumped in a scrap hole instead of being used. If this happened, the mess needed to be dumped out of the mixer quickly before it could partially harden inside the mixer. This only happened once that I was there, and it took an entire shift to chisel the stuff out. We put a mark into the sliding door to show where it should be V's, where it would be when it didn't seal. The process worked like this. A cage of rebar and anchor points was constructed on a base, around a core, and a form bolted around it. The QA guy signed off and the form was then filled with concrete and left to cure. The curing time largely depends on the ambient temperature. The hotter it is, the faster it cures, and vice versa. Once the piece is cured enough to be lifted, the form is stripped and the piece lifted by crane off the core. Repeat until you have as many pieces ordered. Another thing to note is hard hat colors. They were color-coded according to your role. Blue are plant supervisors, green QA, red the foreman, etc. For the normal workers, there was a choice of 2 colors. Yellow for people who don't know what they're doing, typically new or dumb people, and gray for those that do. This was about 5 months into my time with them, and I had just got a gray, when maybe 2 months before. On to the story. Our plant was starting to produce pieces at a substantially slower rate than the other plant owned by the company. We were working 10, 12-hour days every day to try and make up the difference. Typically, multiple pieces were made per form per day, 2-4. We were only managing 1 and maybe 2 per form per day. To figure out the reason for this, the owner's plan was to send an exec from the main office to observe and time every section of the process in our plant. This in itself was silly. Remember how I said the speed concrete cures is based on temperature? Our plant was in an unheated warehouse in a state bordering Canada. The other plant was in Florida. Can you guess why production was a bit slower in our plant? In any case, during the shift meeting before the exec got there, our foreman's exact words were "do what he tells you, otherwise stay away from him." Wonderful. The shift proceeds as normal building cages and forms get bolted. Maybe 6 hours into the shift, I climb up on top of the mixer to the platform and I am greeted by the exec in the shiniest white hard hat I have ever seen. An office attire complete with black dress shoes in a concrete plant. He looked bored out of his mind. He asked me something to the effect of if I was looking forward to the end of shift in 2 hours. I told him that with no problems we might get to leave in 4 hours. He got the most defeated look on his face and mumbled something that I didn't catch. I went through the pre-checks on the mixer and found the bottom door was once again not closing properly. I yelled down to the plant supervisor that the door wasn't sealing again, and that the machine would be down until I got it to seal, normally by chipping the concrete left by the previous shift after using the mixer away from the opening. The plant supervisor yelled back a few choice words directed at the mixer and stormed into his office. The exec had a look and said he thought the door looked fine. I told him that it did this a lot and that it wasn't sealed, pointed out the mark to him, and went to get the tool. I bribed a fabricator with energy drinks to make me chip away the concrete, a breaking bar welded onto a rebar shaft that I kept under the mixer itself. No more hunting down an air gun and going through confined space lock and tagouts. Just stand on top and poke at the concrete until the door moves freely. Upon coming back with the tool, the exec told me that the seal was fine and to run it. I pointed out the same things about the door or sealing regularly. I asked if they were sure. They replied in the affirmative. I started up the mixer. The mixer regularly threw a bunch of silica up into the air. With the water draining out the bottom, this was going to get extra dusty. I offered them an extra mask that I had, and they replied that they would be fine. Well, it's not my lungs. At the same time, I noticed the plant's heavy equipment guy walking into the building and got his attention and made the hand gesture for the front loader. I got a what the hell look from them, and they mouthed why. I pointed down at the mixer, repeated the gesture, and they threw up their hands and turned around. The load went into the mixer. Water started draining out the bottom. Dust went everywhere. Go figure. The plant supervisor comes out of the office, I assume, after seeing the giant cloud on the cameras, runs over and says something like, "What are you doing?" The mixer is quite loud with concrete in it. I got the general geist, though. I just pointed to the exec, who was now covered in dust and staring at the water, pouring out the bottom of the mixer. Never said a word? The plant supervisor's head swiveled, and he just crooked a finger at the exec. The exec climbed down. They exited the building with the plant supervisor leading. The fallout. The front loader was able to get to the mixer before the mess was able to partially cure inside it, so the cleanup was as easy as dumping it into the bucket, and then dumping that in the scrap hole and spraying out the mixer. We continued the shift after I chipped the concrete away from the door and got it closing properly again. Not too much time wasted, maybe an hour. The foreman asked what happened later in the shift and didn't stop laughing for the rest of it. The plant supervisor talked to me afterwards, asked what happened, and told me he didn't blame me for that dumb jerk's mistakes, since he had said to do what the exec said. I never saw the exec again, and the plant supervisor never said what happened in the parking lot. I can only assume that the most this produced was angry phone calls and a lot of concrete wasted. Okay, so a few days ago, my mother came to my door acting like a lunatic. Context. I went no contact months ago because she's a narcissist and she defends her pedophile husband. She came to my door and tried to bulldoze her way into my home. This woman has made my life hell for the past few months. She sent fake custody papers in the mail to scare me. Her husband came to my door kicking it. That's a whole different post look through my post history for more context and to get up to speed. My mother was arrested and charged. Her bond was posted, and I found out through a cousin that someone paid for her bond in full. Her husband was arrested a few months ago for coming to my apartment door and acting a fool. His bond was also posted and paid for. His court date for coming to my apartment, trying to break in, threatening officers, etc., is February 15th, I believe. I have a protective order against her husband, but I'm still in the process of getting one against my mom. She called my husband's job this morning asking for him, and thankfully he switched shifts. My mother keeps calling me from blocked numbers and sending me fake friend requests on Facebook. I'm glad we're moving. Our car was stolen in June and then returned to us at the end of July. It's being worked on, and my husband has had to tell our neighbor's mother who visits she can no longer park in our parking spot. All well and good until today when I am coming home from some errands. The lady is on our stoop asking for my husband and if there is a way he can extend her parking allowance in our spot. She explains she is moving into the townhouse next to us to help care for her grandkids, and she sees that our car is a lost cause. She has said that us losing our car was great so she can park closer to the townhouse and not have to park on the street. What I told her and what my roommate landlord has told her is thus: the car is being returned and instated in October, and you have until then to make arrangements. This woman, who I am assuming has no sense of reality, said the chances of our car ever working is nil and that we should just give her the parking spot. Our townhouses have assigned parking and guest parking spots are adjacent. I told her she has to wait till my husband comes home and talk to him. She literally said she won't talk to him and will just take the spot whenever she wants, regardless if we get our car working or not. Car is currently at my husband's father's being worked on. I know it seems petty, but I'm considering calling a tow truck the next time she does this. Update. Neighbor, who is the son of the woman, has gotten involved and sided with us on the matter. He also had told his mother to park in the guest parking spots from now on or do not come here at all. She also lied to me about moving in. Big surprise. So far, I was given a blessing if she does it again to call a tow truck. We did have someone park in our spot, but he asked if it was okay. He was part of a home inspection because one of our neighbors is selling his townhouse and was only there for 20 minutes. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.